Hello everyone, this is going to be a video on the different types of gas masks NATO had during the Cold War, and this won't include every NATO member. I've mostly done it with masks I obviously own and masks that were sort of new designs rather than, or at least adaptations of old designs rather than, countries that just bought old World War II masks and carried on using those. So on the left we have the French M51, to the right of that we have the dräger M56. The two British masks in the middle are the S6 respirator and then the S10 respirator below that replaced it. And on the right we have the Canadian C3. So what I'm going to do is go into a bit more detail on these masks. You'll notice I don't have any American masks here. There's a simple reason for that. I don't own many American masks because of the unfortunate export rules on American masks. It's very difficult to get them in the UK for sensible prices. The only American masks I have is an original M9 respirator, a XM28 respirator, which is actually a lot rarer than the M17, but I can't find an M17 for some reason, and also one of the MSA masks. I think it's something like the MSA Millennium or MSA 2000, something like that. It's one of the masks the Navy used at one point. America also had lots and lots of different masks that they did to different areas and sort of experimenting around with them. So to keep it simple, we're just going to have the sort of European powers plus Canada and what masks they had. So I'm going to go through each of them in turn, and I'll tell you a bit about what made the mask good or bad. First we have the French M51 respirator. Now of all the masks in this video, this is definitely the worst designed one. This mask would have been adequate when it first came out, but it has some quite serious design flaws. I'm hoping it was designed in the sense that France wanted a cheap mass-producible gas mask, which it certainly is. But I'd say this is worse than the GP5, for example. Even though the GP5 was designed to be cheap and mass-producible for civilians, this is a worse mask if you're actually having to wear it. And I'll try and explain why. So it has a unique head sort of harness, which is sort of cool, but also sort of stupid. So you have, basically the straps come like this, the rubber straps, and these are decent quality, but they hook on at the bottom to these clips here. So you put one on one side, one on the other. They're quite fiddly to get on and they're not that tight, so a jolt could take the straps off. If you're in a chemical scenario, that would kill you. Firstly, there's, as a second point, there's no interior mask to this. What I mean by that is it's just you put your head in, that's the mask. If it's meant to be a cheap mass-producible mask, that's fine. One advantage it has got is air is at least brought up onto the eyepieces. I mean, that's going to be really hard to see on the camera, but you have at least got those things to defog the lenses, which on a mask this cheap is a plus. One of the fatal flaws of this mask, if we take this voice diaphragm sort of section off, or the front cover, that little weak bit of rubber there is your exhale valve. Now, as you can probably see, that's very flimsy. Obviously the mask's a good year old, it's 50 something years old, this mask, but I've seen versions of this where the rubber has split here and broken, and also because of how weak this rubber would have been to begin with, it's not very thick. If you had some sort of blistering agent type thing, it looks like there's even a little mark there that could be the start of that going, that eats away at rubber, some sort of horrible chemical agent, that would eat through that very quickly and kill you. It's really not adequate. Very cheap sort of thin either glass or plastic eyepieces, and the eye bits I don't really trust either, they feel quite flimsy. They're a cool mask to have as a collector, but this was a woefully inadequate mask. It almost feels like it should have been a stopgap, a bit like what the Sten was as a submachine gun. A desperate last measure kind of gun that was thrown together as cheaply as possible to be mass produced. This mask feels like that, and then like they never came along and did anything better. I said in the video the other day that French soldiers in the Gulf War were actually issued with these, and you can see in the photos that they all have mismatching filters as well, which I really feel sorry for anybody who had to wear this. In a chemical attack, they would have died in the Gulf. It was as simple as that. So the advantages to this mask was it was cheap to produce, but it really feels like they should have come along with something better. I don't know if there was any experimental masks that were never mass produced, but it seems that France, after getting rid of this mask, has actually just bought masks from other countries. I can't see any new French masks. They seem to either just have sort of anybody else. I've seen a lot of French soldiers in pictures with Avon masks. They probably bought other masks as well, but it seems for now France doesn't have a new mask. If anybody does know if they've got an actual proper mask, let me know, but as far as I'm aware, they used this up until the 90s at 2000s at some point, and then swapped it out for just various other masks they could get a hold of. One feature of all these masks, except the Canadian one, is their 40mm NATO filters, which is something you'll see as a common thing with all these masks, and it was a very clever idea for them to do that. Here we go, here's the French M51 mask. As said, it has this weird strap system, so you basically have to try and get all this around. This thing over your head. And then once you've got everything all together, you have to put this clip on this side. And this clip on this side, which isn't the easiest job in the world. There we go, it's on. So, pressure fit. As you can see, I don't have a very good field of view. Basically, as soon as it gets to that area, I can't see much. It's like horse blinded. You can only really see just in front of you in it, like that direction. It's not really got a voice diaphragm on. As you can see, as I'm exhaling, that bit there is moving, which acts as a slight voice diaphragm, but it's not very good. It would have protected you, as I said in the time, but really this was a stopgap mask that never got replaced, in my opinion. It's not a brilliant design. It's basically a World War II mask that's been slightly modernised, but not by much. And as I said, it would be woefully inadequate to actually have had to needed this in the Gulf War. But, like I said, at least it's got this system to demist when you breathe in. But, as I said, this isn't a very well designed mask. They could have done a lot better. It's a shame they didn't replace it with something maybe sort of 10 or 20 years later, but it is what it is. French M51. There's also a Belgium export version. I'm not sure which version I've got. But the best thing about this is actually the carry sack it comes in. It's quite a good canvas carry sack, but the mask itself I'm not a big fan of at all. I mean, it even shakes around quite a lot at the bottom if you do that, so, and you can't look down because of the filter. So there we go. My chin also moves about a fair bit inside the mask as well, so overall not a good mask. Now the West German dräger M65. This is a much better mask than the French one. I've done a completely separate video on this one. Again, it's 40mm filter port at the bottom. What makes this better, obviously, bigger triangular eyepieces, gives you a much better field of vision in the mask. Much sturdier eyepieces as well. Thicker rubber, feels of a much better quality. You've got an actual proper voice diaphragm there for the exhale valve. And you've also got an inner mask on the inside of this mask. So what that means is that you've actually, you know, kind of have less fogging in it. You can get a more comfortable fit. You've got a hole there to drain sweat away from the chin. Overall, it's a much better designed mask. You still obviously got the bits to blow air up over the eyepieces, but as I said, again, this is the dräger M65 is a much better designed mask. West Germany used this until they were reunified. Then they had a new mask. I think it might be called the M2000, but every time I've looked for one, they've been very expensive, so I've never bothered getting one. But this mask is still good. There's a bit of a flaw with it where the chin is a weak spot, and apparently that's there on some of the clones, although I've not found it on the Israeli mask. Basically, when you've got on your head, if you look down at too sharp an angle, that will force that bit to move like that, letting in gas. Obviously that's a design flaw, but overall the M65 is a very good mask from the period. Right, now we have the dräger M65. As I said, I've done a video on this before. It is a very good mask, so we'll get it over and on. Oh, my ears pop now from pressurising that. But yeah, the dräger M65, as I said, there's a bit of a weak spot where if you look down too much, you can start inhaling through the chin area, because it doesn't sit that tight, in my opinion, to your face. However, apart from that being said, this is a very good mask. Much better field of vision than the A&P. You know, it's only in this section here that I can't see to my side. I can see to my side there and there. Also much better vertical vision. The triangular lenses work well, and you should be able to hear that the voice diaphragm works well. So yeah, overall, very good mask. The dräger, much better than the French one.
Not much else to be said about it. It's a very good mask.
Now for the British masks of the period. On the left we have the S6, which was developed in the 50s and put into production in the 60s, and it was designed to replace the light anti-gas respirator that Britain had been using before, which was a 60mm mask, but then Britain went to 40mm, like everybody else in NATO was meant to be doing, except America. Even though they're the boss of NATO, they decided they didn't want to do that. So what you've got here is basically a mask that tries to be quite modern. The design influences are still there on modern masks. You can see a lot of similarities between it and the S10 on the right. You've got a 40mm filter that goes on the left side of the mask. That's quite a good design. Obviously it means for most right-handed shooters the filter's out of the way. It also means the filter's not at the bottom of the mask if you want to look down. You've got two quite big eyepieces that are slightly curved. Now, I don't actually like these. The reason for that being is, although they give a good field of view, you get a fisheye effect where the lens turns, so it can make you feel quite nauseous if you're wearing it. Although you do get good peripheral vision, the actual curvature of the sort of glass or plastic means that, you know, it's not a comfortable mask to look for. It gives you eye strain. Voice diaphragm works well, and this mask has a really weird, unique feature I've never seen on any other mask. And what that is that there's like a little tap there. You blow into it to inflate this cushion around the inside of the mask, so you can make the mask custom tighter or sort of looser. We have the drainage ports again in the chin section, good voice diaphragm, and the air is brought upwards onto the lenses as you'd expect. So, in a mask as well. It's a very, very good design. You know, I really can't fault it. The S6 is famous for being used in Operation Nimrod, the SAS sort of embassy raid. And yeah, very good mask. Very little faults except the eyepieces, but these are still being used by some countries, or they build them. Turkey uses this mask in a weird white colour. But overall the S6 is a brilliant mask. So then we have the S10 that replaced it, and the S10 is one of my favourite masks ever designed. It takes what was good about the S6 and sort of improves upon it. You've got a secondary voice diaphragm there, which you can also plug a radio onto. You've got a main voice diaphragm exhale valve there, so two voice diaphragms mean you can be heard a lot more clearly. You've got a drinking straw in this one that you can take in and out of the mask by doing that, although I found that doesn't quite work properly. That's where you attach the drinking straw to the canteen. It takes a 40mm filter on the outside of the mask, the same as the other ones. They made a more lightweight plastic one for the S10. It's available with outserts, or you can have outserts off. That's what the mask looks like with them off. I've got the cool sort of red night vision laser type ones on there. So that's what the mask would look like normally. See, very good eyepieces that give you a good field of view. You can see very, very clearly from an S10. And that you'll see on the date stamp. I was lucky enough, because I have two S10s, to get one that was 2009 dated one. So if it's on a 10-year shelf life, that's 2019. On a 10-year shelf life, 2019. 20 years shelf life, that's available till 2029. So this would be a perfectly functional mask in an NBC scenario. You can put new filters on it easily. And you've got very good vision on the inside, as said. People can hear you clearly, comfortable fit. Altogether, this is a really well put together mask. You know, they really knew what they were doing with it. And then they surpassed it a bit later with the CT12 FM12, which is basically a very similar face shape to the S10, but they just said, let's change it around. But Britain never bought that for service. The armed police use the FM12, I believe, or the CT12, but the British Army eventually went to the Scott GSR, which in my opinion is an inferior mask to this for a couple of reasons I've said before in other videos.
So, the British S6 respirator, as I said about this, it's a very well designed mask, but I really don't like the eyepieces on it. Basically, as I said, you know, these eyepieces, it's really weird. It's like, I can see straight ahead fine, but in the corner of my eye it's blurry. If I look sideways, I can see sideways fine, but then the front goes blurry. It's this sort of little ridge here where the mask, sort of the plastic's sort of shaped, where it really doesn't feel nice to look in this. That is just so weird doing that with this mask on, because of that. As I said, you can inflate the front sides to fit your face. I probably need to tighten the straps on it slightly, but overall this is a very good mask. But yeah, I don't like these bits on it. Now for my favourite mask of the lot, the S10. Very good vision range. You can actually see a little less than the S6, I'd say, in hindsight with it on, although you've got better vertical vision and downward vision. But that comes at the price where the S10 is much better in terms of it doesn't give you that weird, blurry, bent plastic thing. Obviously, this is with the outserts on. I can take the outserts off, and I can see very, very clearly. There's not much, you know, you can't see the bridge of the nose too much. As I said, it's got the drinking tube on it. I don't really like how that goes into your mouth. It never seems to quite work right. But other than that, you know, clear voice diaphragms. You've got the one on the side and the exhale bit on the front where you can hear the voice from. 40mm filter as standard. And as I said, until this was replaced, well, with Britain it wasn't replaced by FM12, but Avon now make the FM12 and CT12 as sort of the improved version of this mask. It's very, very good. You know, you can see very clearly through it. It's a very nice weight, comfortable, good rubber. There's not much you can fault about this mask. I still think this is one of the best designed masks I've ever seen. There are other very good masks, but I think this, when it came out in the 80s, was to replace the S6, one of the, you know, the best masks ever designed.
And lastly, we have the Canadian C3. This is a 60mm mask, so when they modernised, they went to 40mm for the C4 that replaced this. However, 60mm is still good, it's just it wasn't standardised. 60mm gives you a good sort of amount of breathing room, which is sort of an advantage. Now, the Canadian C3 is basically the British light anti-gas respirator from World War II that's been modernised slightly. It's got a much better voice diaphragm exhale valve area around there. It's made of a much better quality rubber, and it's got an inner mask section, which I can't remember if it was on the light anti-gas respirator or not, but I don't think it was. But regardless, it's a better made one. It's a very simple mask, but it was effective. They replaced it with the C4 later on, which was a 40mm mask, which is a very good quality mask, but unfortunately I do not have one in my collection.
And now the Canadian C3. This is actually a lot better than I remember it being when I, you know, put it on. The interesting thing is I did just go and check the light anti-gas respirator, and it definitely doesn't have the nose cup section, so this is much better at defogging and sort of comfort to the face. So it's just basically a retrofitted old mask in a sense. They looked at the light anti-gas respirator and said we can improve it by, you know, doing this, this and this. And that's what you got, so proper voice diaphragm and, you know, a sort of in a nose cup section. Good all-round vision with these big round lenses. They fit quite close to the eyes. So, you know, I can see sort of like that. Compare that to something like the French M51 and you can see a lot more clearly. As I said, 60mm filter, so that's outdated. However, if you did want to use one of these masks and didn't want to use a 60mm filter, you could buy a 60 to 40mm filter converter, screw that on, and then use any NATO filter with it. The only issue of this flexible rubber is it makes me feel it would be a bit weaker, sort of face connecting wise. There's also a bit of a flaw where the heavy 60mm filter on one side pulls the mask down a bit. So the right side of my face can feel a bit of sort of, you know, pull on it from the left side doing that. But overall, yeah, the C3 is a very good mask. It's said a lot more primitive than some of the other masks, but it works. So that's a good thing, you know. If it works, and it works. So there we go. That's all of your NATO masks. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please like and subscribe.